Hi, everybody. It's Constance. You probably know me from the council. This is sort of like an auxiliary channel to that. And today I have a very special guest. I'm so excited to talk about something that we've been thinking about for a little while. So, my guest today is George. You should know him from the Horror Hour. Say hi, George.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about this thing.
Ooh, suspense. Let's get right to it.
Yes.
So we're talking about Spencer today. This is a spoiler talk. So if you haven't seen it, I don't think there's a lot to quote spoil, but in case you don't want to know
Mhm.
anything like how they approach this film and all that, then go watch that first, please, and then come back. So this is going to be fun.
Then come back.
So George tells me that, he got to see it early, so it's been a little while. So before you lose any train of thought, why don't you talk about your impressions, your overall thoughts, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was so hyped for. Well, I went through an emotional roller coaster of feelings from the beginning, when this film was announced, and they'd said there was going to be a Princess Diana movie, and I was a bit like, "Ooh," because the last Diana movie with Naomi Watts wasn't great, and so I was a bit like, "Oof." And then, of course, The Crown series 4 had come out, so we were already like reeling off Emma Corrin, and then they announced that Kristen Stewart was going to be Diana. And I don't know. I don't. I was just like, this is the most bizarre casting that I have ever heard of. When I heard about it, and I remember my friends saying, "This is crazy." Like, okay, sure, I can sort of see, the look in her face. I can kind of get that, but the accent is so. I reserved judgment. I was like, and then the next minute, like say a few months later, the images came up of the first image of her with the outfit on, and I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind this. Then they released the teaser trailer and the other trailer, and I was like, okay, this really got me hyped. So I'd kind of been ready for it for a while, and the sort of like tidbits that had been like the breadcrumbs that had been sprinkled had definitely got me interested in this film. Now, I haven't seen Pablo's, I didn't see Jackie, so I sort of didn't know what to expect in terms of what the movie would be like. But obviously, yeah, I saw it early. I managed to go and see it at London Film Festival, and Kristen Stewart was there, and she's so cool. And it was just as soon as the film started, I was just immediately intrigued by her performance. It felt a lot different from anything we've seen before. And there's been a lot of, if you really look for them, there's been a lot of Diana TV shows, TV movies, lots of things. And at first I was slightly worried maybe the accent hadn't, really, she hadn't got it right. But after like 10 or 15 minutes of the film, I was immediately in this story. And by the end of the film, I could not see anyone but Diana. Like Kristen Stewart had gone for me. So, I mean, overall, I think if you go into this blind and maybe you don't sort of know, I think you can get an idea of the style from the trailer, but there are parts and the elements of this film that I was like, oh my God, I just couldn't imagine, I just didn't see them going this way. And I thought it was a really interesting thing to do. And obviously, we have to say that we don't know what happened on those days in 1991 and Christmas. This is a dramatization of what could have happened. So, but I think, it's really interesting to see this story. And yeah, so I mean, overall, I really, really enjoyed it. And I came out just thinking, wow. And I was so annoyed that I'd seen it early because I couldn't talk to anyone about it because nobody had seen it. But now that everyone is starting to see it, it's so exciting to be able to talk about it. So overall, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and I can't wait to see it again. And you've just come out of it. So, I mean, you're fresh off the press. Constance, tell
Yes.
me, what are your thoughts?
Yes. So my background, I was on the planet the same time as her. So I knew her as an icon, and I knew about that tragic day in August in 97, So I only knew what the public was allowed to see as an American too. So even more removed. So she was more of a myth than anything. So I've watched a lot of stuff. I like biopics on, real people, especially the more that they're in the zeitgeist. Like she was, there's celebrities and then there's celebrities, and she was a global one. Not everyone that's made into a movie is a global sensation, but she certainly was. I was similar train of. Now I'm not on board with the casting thing. Every time I hear people are not on board with casting, like no one could see Daniel Craig as Bond, and no one could see Christian Bale as Batman. Now no one can see Robert Pattinson as Batman. I'm like, I don't listen to all that because they're always proven wrong. I'm like, you weren't in the room. You don't know. They saw something. So I never rely on the whole, you cast who as what. I'm like, hang on, we weren't in the room. And I don't hold her Twilight years against her. I'm like, look, a paycheck is a paycheck. Okay. And I like that both of them are moving beyond that, by the way. It's very good timing that they both have a movie coming out like that. Trailers got me hyped. So yes, I was supposed to see this last night, but the projection for that theater broke down. And so they just canceled the showing. So I just got out of the theater now. This is when George was free. I was like, I have to do this with George. This is so important. I want his thoughts specifically. I want anybody's thoughts who wants to join me on future reviews, just saying. But I really wanted George's thoughts for this. This is very unique. So I'm still digesting it. Poor choice of words, I feel like, considering the content of the movie. But it's very raw. It's not really appropriate to call it a biopic. It's more a psychological study. And it's very intimate. It's very harsh. It's not flattering, but I think that's on purpose. And I think the idea is just to break it down even more, because the problem with other biopics is they're still so glossy, and it's all like, oh, look, here's that spunky kid who has an it factor, and they get discovered, and then, oh no, some man does her wrong, but then they rise to the occasion and it's okay because they're famous or they went platinum or something. I'm like, yeah, but sometimes it doesn't end in happily ever after. So it was nice to see it really funnel down, and because we don't really spend time with anybody but her. Like, you can't even comment too much on the other cast members or the world building too much because it's very intimate. So it is good to go into this movie knowing it's not what you think. It's not going to be like Bohemian Rhapsody or Respect or a movie like that. You mentioned Jackie. Yes, it is by the same director or same writer or both. I meant to look that up.
Same director. I think he does both, but definitely the same director, Pablo.
Okay.
Something.
I wouldn't say they're the same. Yes, they're about a woman in a high position who goes through a tragedy, but I wouldn't say they're similar beyond that. You don't look at it going, oh, clearly it's this. The way you would, like, you look at something going, clearly this is a Tim Burton film. It doesn't have that kind of staple look to it. And you also mentioned the whole, we don't know that this is what happened. It opens with, this is a fable based on a tragic, story. A fable is not as a story. It's not true. So they tell you from frame one, what if it went like this, right? So the idea is we're just following her, and like the camera is always like right here. It doesn't zoom out very much, except to show her being isolated and alone for isolation shots. And we don't really spend time with the other characters. Like, as much as we've seen other dramatizations, the queen barely, she appears in this movie, but she barely talks. The king barely talks. There's one scene with Charles. And I think all that's on purpose. I'm like, right, it's not about them. This is about her, So
I would say that most of
yeah.
I would say most of what you see from the other characters is actually in the trailer. Like, I feel like the trailer is kind of, I mean, there are a couple of other scenes, but like for the majority, like you say, it's not like The Crown where you're following this family. This really is about Diana. And because I was not nervous, but intrigued to see how they were going to approach the other character, well, say characters, they are real people, how they were going to approach the rest of the royals and etc. And I think that was a good idea to do that, because one, it makes you feel like Diana and isolated from them because no one really talks. There is one scene that I really liked between Diana and the Queen, when she goes outside, and obviously this is spoilers, but we're talking about it, so it's fine. When she comes out, and I think she says something along the lines of, Diana refused to wear an outfit for the photograph or something, and she says, oh, I remember when they asked me to wear something, and I said no. And it was kind of like, because I think that's something that's important, that although, you know, the Queen was very unhappy from one side of the way that Diana and Charles, how that turned out, I think she also did understand her in a sense, but she couldn't fully because of her position, and she wasn't able to give what Diana needed and a lot of those people. So that was a long tangent, but what I'm saying is that it is, I think it's great that we don't see. I think if you had conversations with, like, say, oh, I'm talking to Fergie, and oh, here's, you know, me and Anne having a conversation, you know, it would take away from that element. But I think she has a lot of screen time, mainly with Timothy Spall, who plays a really interesting character, who's one of the stewards of Sandringham. And what did you think about his character? Because I was like, he really annoyed me at times. I was like, can you just go away?
Yeah, I didn't like him. And I was like, okay, are they using this as a surrogate? Because again, this is a topic that has been done, and The Crown is a very recent successful rendition. So it's like, okay, we've just spent a lot of time with I've never spent that much time with Queen Elizabeth before. The Crown is the first thing where I'm like, I kind of understand if this is at all even close to how she really feels. I feel like I get her, you know, but my whole life I've been told, oh, she's so cold and so distant and nobody likes her. That's what I've been told. I don't know if that's true. This is why I like having a, you know, British person here to be like, this is how we tend to feel, you know, because I wonder how do you feel about your monarchy? You know, like my daughter's learning about government right now, and she's like, don't some countries still have kings and stuff? I'm like, yeah. And we started talking about it. I was like, you know, Britain's really interesting because they have their monarchy, but they also have parliament. And I'm not quite sure what that's all, how it works. It's not my country, so I don't pay attention. But I'm like, yeah, I do wonder what the average person, like if I just went to London with a microphone and interviewed people, what would they have to say if you're even allowed to talk about it? Like, how do you feel? You know, like, oh yeah, they're a nice thing. That's what makes us special, or nah, we don't care, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a mixed bag. I mean, a lot of the UK are divided with the monarchy at this point, particularly now, I think, and especially since, well, I think if you look through a lot of the later reign of, I mean, she's still reigning, but a lot of the, you know, from the 70s, 80s onwards, there was definitely, or even since Elizabeth came into power, there was a sort of shift within, I think, the British public on the monarchy. And now I really admire Princess. I really admire Queen Elizabeth. You know, and a lot of people, it's a waste of money and all this. And, you know, there's a lot of people that say, you know, what do they really do? And I'm on the side of, well, look, you know, they do. And then everyone goes, oh, you always talk about how they bring in tourism, which they do. They bring in a lot of tourism. Like, what else is there to see in the UK apart from rain? Nothing apart from the castles and the royal, and to know that the royal family live there. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's nothing. So for me, I have not a love-hate relationship. I find them all so fascinating. I find all of them really fascinating. I find how Elizabeth rose to the occasion, and really just looking at how this girl's life when she was so young was turned upside down because of her. For those of you who obviously don't know, it was her uncle who was originally king, and he abdicated, and so her father became king. So she was never going to be queen. I mean, obviously people can say she was going to be queen because it was meant to be. And I think she has done a brilliant job at holding it together. And yes, that has come at a cost for family and for people to say that she is cold. But I think she toes the line between tradition and, you know, what the crown has to be. And I think she was the last one of those people, because all of her kids are troubled. Well, Anne's not particularly troubled. They've all had issues, be it because they've all come from that sort of family where it has been very, you know, standoffish, or we don't hug and we don't do that. So I'm intrigued by the royal family, and I do think they're important. I think they do hold an important moment. Yes, it's no longer, you know, it's not Henry VIII where they're making laws and decisions. But at this point, you know, I suppose you can say they're a celebrity in a way. I mean, the Queen isn't, you know, there's a lot of charity work. Her and Philip are probably the last real royals, and I would say the rest of them are just sort of like, so I mean, obviously you can look at the whole Harry and Meghan situation and all that, it's a lot more celebrity now. But when Diana came into it, the monarchy was at a point where they needed somebody to bring the people back to them, which is what Diana did. Unfortunately for the crown, they fell too much in love with her, in a sense, a lot of people. And so that kind of, the monarchy kind of, broke off a bit. And then when she died, of course, there was a point when people thought, they were like, let's boycott the money because the Queen didn't say anything. And, there's lots of discussions on there. But I think if you were to ask people, I think it's a mixed bag. There are people who would say that are extreme royalists. There are people who are like, no, we need to banish the monarchy. And then there's me in the middle, I would say, who's sort of like, I understand why they're there and I find it interesting. But yeah, I'm really intrigued to see the future of the monarchy. I think Diana was a tipping point, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's a mixed bag in the UK. It's not all, we're not all, White Raven or, Union Jacks anymore, I don't think. But I think when we have parts, like we have the royal weddings and things, and we have the jubilees, more people kind of get involved, and it kind of gives you that sort of, patriotic feel, I suppose. But I do think that when Elizabeth dies, I'm really intrigued to see, because I feel like a lot of people love Queen Elizabeth rather than the monarchy itself. So that let's see. But yeah, I think there'll be a shift very soon.
Right. I didn't mean to go there so quickly because you asked me about how I felt about that character. Yes, I agree he was annoying, but I felt like maybe they made that character to be a surrogate. So it's like, oh, let's not make this about them, because if we give them all those lines, then it's about them. Mm-hmm. So that's my take. Maybe that's why they had this character do it. Kind of like, she's talking to the servants, like she's coming into the room and asking the maid, like, oh, these pearls, he gave them to me, but he gave them to her too. Like, can I give them to you? Like, I like that she's talking to the help, right? Mm-hmm. Like she knows that chef's name by first name, and that's all very interesting. Because the very first thing I really remember people saying was, I know Tony Blair kind of coined the whole "she was the people's princess," but I feel like people already felt that way before it was like a coined expression. It's like, oh, she's not this mythical princess. She's like a real, like, for modern times. Mm-hmm. And that's just another example of like, see, she's just one of us, she's just like us. She likes fast food, and she, wants to get dressed by herself, and, all that. So.
Yeah, I would
agree. That stuff's
great. Yeah, I think that, but she's a really interesting character because, as I say, obviously, if people haven't guessed, I'm a big fan of Princess Diana, and a lot of people are, but for me, I think she's such an interesting character study because although I would never deny that she did so much good and she I also see the other side to her that maybe other people didn't. And I think this film does a good part of towing the line. I think it's very, it's difficult to sort of discuss those things. And I think especially when somebody's died as well, and especially in a tragic accident like that, you don't want to make her out to be a villain. She wasn't a villain at all. However, she did have her, she, like all of us, she had her flaws. Mm-hmm. And I think this does a sort of a good job of showing that. But I think it's always going to be difficult to show that. But for me, that's why I really like her, is I just find her such an interesting case study on how she changed from being this, young, doe-eyed virgin to someone who really, by the end of it, understood the game. Unfortunately, she thought she was able to control the media, and she couldn't, and that's obviously what led to her demise. But I think this film does a good job of showing both sides. For like, you do feel sorry for a lot of the time, but I think there's parts where you kind of feel like, oh, come on, like, just stop, or like, let's just. I think there's elements where you're like, you're not helping yourself in a way. But I think that it does a great line. It really has, like I say, it just works really well. But I mean, I have to say, just go back to the Queen real quick. She terrified me in that film. Like, she just gave that look she gives her over the table when they're talking. I was like, she's like, I would not want to mess with her.
That makes sense, because there's a lot of she only has that one scene outside where she talks. Otherwise, it is very like she's sitting here and she goes, it's like,
and you're like,
oh my god. Yeah. Those are good points. I don't think this is a flawless film. I didn't like the Anne Boleyn stuff. Like at first she was like, oh, do you remember Anne Boleyn? And I'm like, I wouldn't consider her a role model if that's what you mean. I wasn't sure where she was going with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she was hallucinating that she saw her, I didn't really care for that. That felt a little over the top. I'm like, well, I don't know if we need to have a scene where she's imagining that she sees her and then at one point imagine that she is her.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't follow her. Like I didn't read her biography. I did watch that that famous tape or whatever, that interview that someone gathered to make their book. Oh,
so you've got the tape. You've got the diner tapes. This is the book that I've just placed so lovely behind here. The Andrew Morton book. This is a good read. I would definitely recommend this. But you might be referring to the famous BBC Panorama interview with Martin Bashir, which is the big one that now has sort of transpired that it was not done correctly, in the sense that Martin Bashir actually lied to her and had falsified documents saying that, like, from the royal family, saying that Diana was unstable and that they didn't like her and stuff like that. So it's a little bit crazy at the moment. Yes, that book was the beginning. When that book was released, that was like when the royal family were like, because that was in 1992, so that was the year, this is December 1991. This was in the August or September, I believe, of 1992. So the book dropped, and that was when they were like, okay, this is enough. Right.
So I haven't done that thorough research. That's the reason why I'm like, George needs to be here just to be my fact checker. Has she ever at any point discussed like, oh, I don't want to be queen because I worry that that'll be me? Like, I don't know if she talked that way. So I'm like, why put this in the film unless there was reason to believe that's how she might have felt, or
Well, she always used to say that even from the beginning, although she knew she was destined for great things, and she does say that, and she says that in the book, she always knew when she was younger that she was destined for something, bigger than herself. But she did always state that she really did, or throughout her time in the royal family, she really did not believe that she would ever be queen. And she does say that on multiple occasions in interviews and things, and she says it in the Martin Bashir interview where she says, I don't think I'll ever be queen. So maybe it was like a sort of nod to that sort of Anne Boleyn sort of probably didn't really, I mean, she was queen, that's different. But yeah, maybe the whole, I didn't hate the Anne Boleyn thing. I'm kind of the whole film to me felt like a fever dream anyway, not in a negative way, but you're just kind of like, oh my God, what am I watching? And I didn't hate it. Yeah, I felt like maybe it was a little bit too much at times. Maybe we didn't need so much of it. But it was interesting. I didn't hate it, but you didn't need it. You could have done something else with it maybe, but because there was a lot already going on in the film. So, but yeah, it was an interesting look, I suppose. I mean, you're looking at a man who, I suppose it's the relation to Henry VIII, and how he was, having multiple affairs when he was married to her. I mean, she was the affair originally, and then of course when she decided to do the same thing or speak up, he was like, okay, bye. So I think maybe it was sort of her processing the fact that if she speaks up, she could end up like Anne Boleyn. Maybe, I don't know. That was what I kind of got from it, and that she felt very similar to that way that she was kind of shunned away. So, but I suppose films like this, they're really open to interpretation, I suppose, and you can kind of make your own assumptions. But that was mine. But yeah, I do agree. Like at first I was like, oh, okay, here's Anne Boleyn. So, but hey.
Yeah. But what I thought was a better use of that technique was the Sally Hawking, Maggie, that character. Mm-hmm. Because when she's embracing that one woman and then she pulls away and it's not her, it's someone else. I was like, oh, is Maggie an imaginary friend? Are we going down that rabbit hole? Because that would be way more interesting than, oh, look, there's Anne Boleyn in the corner warning me to not, be her. And I'm like, I don't look at your lives and think, oh yeah, look at the parallels. I'm like, no, Anne Boleyn is a whole other bag of crazy. So I was like, no, let's not mix that in with this,
Yeah, no, I agree. Sally Hawkins was really, she was such a great character. Mag, I really like Maggie. And yeah, I was the same at that point. I was like, oh my God, is Maggie not real? And I think that again really plays the strength of the film, and that you do feel like Diana, and Diana obviously did have a lot of mental breakdowns and things like that, and you kind of feel like that sort of like a psychosis in a sense. And again, going back to that idea of like the fever dream, like you're kind of like, oh my God, I don't even know, is she, yeah, is this right, is this wrong, I don't know. And so I think that really does. And one thing I want to pick up on before I forget, because there is one scene, and the whole, I don't know what it was like with you, but the whole auditorium, because it was obviously very busy when I went, all went at the same time. And it's when she has the pliers after she's cut open the drapes of the curtains, and she just you can see it happening, and she does it, and you're just like, oh my God. And that was like, even though it's such a tiny thing, I was just like, oh my God, this is like, oof, it was crazy. It just really stayed with me.
No, that's what I mean about the whole, it's raw. It doesn't gloss over anything. So instead of trying to encompass her whole life, it's like, why don't we just take one weekend with the in-laws? Who doesn't know what that's like, especially even if you're not married, if you're in a serious relationship with anyone, and then you have to meet the family, and what if you don't jive with them? I think that moment's very relatable. So I think funneling down to just that, and a holiday weekend to boot. I mean, holidays already have so much pressure on them. And this is like the ultimate pressure because they are the ultimate family. So I think that moment is relatable, and it is shocking because maybe you don't want to admit that that could be you, and maybe that has been you in the past, So yeah, that was a very moment for sure.
Yeah. And there's a lot of those little things where you can sort of see yourself in it. But I think what I do like about this film, and I think, is that the ending is very, like, I sort of found it as a sort of, and by the way, sorry if anybody can hear any gun, it's not a gun going off in the background, by the way. I said to Constance at the beginning, there's fireworks going off, so nobody threat. It's not the MI5 coming to get me because I've talked about the royal family, so good. But what I would say is that the ending, I thought, was it's kind of like a bittersweet, because you can see how relieved she is to leave, because obviously at the end she leaves, she takes the boys and she leaves, and the family, like, go. And you sort of you can see, like, I feel her freedom in that sense, but also to know what's to come kind of makes it sad. You don't have to end, on 10 years later, whatever it was, 6 years later, she's dead. You're like, oh, you don't need that, because that ending where you see that little bit of happiness that realistically all she got, and it was even shorter than that, really, because even between 92 and 95, she was still in that royal circle. It was only 96 that the divorce actually went through. So she only really had a year of real freedom, but this was the beginning of that new life. And I think you think of it and think, oh, it's really beautiful, and she's with her kids, but then in your head you're sort of like, it's also really sad, because you just know what's to come. And so it kind of, like, I think it did a really good job of doing that.
Yeah, I thought that ending was very well done, because the whole film, appropriately so, is very dour. So I'm glad it doesn't end down. I'm glad they're like, and let's lift you up a little bit. So when we send you out, you're not quite so, oh, life is just so meaningless and hopeless. Like, I don't feel hopeless. I do feel a sense of, like, yeah, there's going to be dark times, but it will not always be dark.
No.
My favorite parts of the movie were the scenes with her and her sons, like when they were up late with the candlelight, and she gave them their secret extra presents and all that. That felt very real, just because I'm a mom, and sometimes the best times I've had with my own kid have been at like 2 a.m. Like, it's one of those, are you asleep? No. Are you asleep? And then before you know it, you're talking for a while. Like, I was like, that is such a mom thing. That is exactly how it goes if you're close to your kids. So that was very relatable to me. I'm like, I get this moment. I've done this kind of thing with my own child. And so that felt very sweet and real. And and I liked the children who played. I don't know why people are against child actors. I never think one way or the other, but I liked these two. I thought they did great. They weren't annoying, but they weren't unrealistically sweet. They just felt like, your typical boys at that age. So
yeah,
that was my favorite part.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked those scenes, and I really liked obviously that the night that scene, but also the one when she kind of had a little bit of a mental break, and she kind of like goes and locks herself in the room, and William's like, mum, come on, and like you kind of, it's sad, and you kind of feel bad for them, but I thought that was a really good scene because it shows that you can imagine that happening the same way you can imagine her comforting her children in those times. You can imagine the vice versa, because obviously they weren't naive, they sort of knew that something was up, and I think that was really good to show that as well. I think the scenes, they were brilliant, and I enjoyed the scene between her and Charles in the billiard room or whatever it was, the library, was good. I mean, that actor, I saw him at the premiere. He looks old in that film, but he's like 30 odd. He's really young. Like, they did a really good job. And there was another actress that, I mean, she played Princess Anne, who I know she was on a TV show in the UK anyway. But I was like, when I found out that was her, because she didn't really speak, I think she had like 2 words. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that was her. Anyway. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the best scenes were the ones between her and the kids. But I also did enjoy those later scenes between her and Timothy Spall's character, because I think that he kind of went on a journey with her as well. And at the beginning, you're kind of like, oh, he's so annoying, but then you can kind of understand where he's coming from. And so, yeah, I really liked, but I would be very shocked if she doesn't win the Oscar at this point. Honestly, like I'm a huge Lady Gaga fan, and I'm super excited for House of Gucci, and I'm sure she's going to be amazing. I'll reserve judgment until that's out. Maybe I'll change my mind, but I think this is more on that level. I don't know what you think. Do you think this is, and also do you think this has any chance of being nominated in any other category? Sorry, we're jumping into Jack's territory now of Oscar talk, but we can do it here too.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's really for everybody. Yeah. I do agree. I'm not good at predicting things, and I don't want to say, oh, she deserves it because, oh, here we have a great actress playing an iconic part, and that's just so Oscar baity. And but I don't think so. This doesn't feel phoned in, like, oh, they just got it, meh, because it's just so different from other things we've seen. It's not the same thing as when Meryl Streep played Margaret Thatcher. That was the typical Hollywood glossed over. Yeah. And it's Meryl Streep. I'm like, okay, we don't have to nominate her just because she exists. Like, yeah. I know she's amazing, but come on. I wouldn't say The Iron Lady was amazing. It was, adequate. Good,
but yeah, agreed.
But this is just so different. And it didn't feel like Kristen Stewart was voguing. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It didn't feel very much like, look at me. Oh, I'm Diana. Oh, I'm so tragic. It didn't have that extra layer that Oscar hungry films tend to. It felt like, it's like, no, we're just making this, and if you don't even consider us, we don't care, because we're trying to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so that's another question I specifically had for you. When you line up all the content that has anything to do with this subject matter, mm-hmm. when this comes along, what do you think the point of this is? Do you think this serves better than other things have done? Do you think, oh, thank God we have this, because like you mentioned, other works are not as good? Like, how do you view this on the spectrum there?
I would honestly say that this is probably my favorite adaptation of Diana, because obviously there's been a few TV movies that were just, I mean, not even worth like mentioning. They were just kind of made for the sake of it, very Lifetimey. And then of course you had, as I said, the Naomi Watts movie, which just wasn't very good. Nothing against Naomi Watts, I think she's great, but she wasn't Diana to me. So when Emma Corrin came about in The Crown, I was like, wow, okay, this is great. And I think Emma Corrin did a really good job of portraying those emotional scenes throughout it. When she had that art, I mean, one of the best scenes I would say in all of The Crown, apart from my favorite moment of all time, is in series 1 when Queen Mary bows to Queen Elizabeth, well, who will be Queen Elizabeth at the time. That's just such a powerful scene. But when Diana and Charles have the argument in series 4, episode 10, about why would I care about Camilla, that is fantastic scene, and she does such an amazing job. But I do think there's something about Kristen's performance that really just, I don't know, just adds another layer to the character. And and it's not all, I feel like a lot of what Emma did, and that's nothing against Emma, because that was what, and I'm intrigued to see what Elizabeth Debicki does in the next couple of seasons. I think that's going to be really interesting. But, you know, a lot of The Crown relied upon this whole, you know, eyes down, like head down, eyes up, sort of lost sheep vibe. Whereas I think this adds more layers onto Diana, and I think it delves in. It has the you're able to delve into her more because this is about her. Unlike The Crown, obviously she was a huge part of The Crown, don't get me wrong, and of course she was going to be. But you are also looking, I mean, series 4 was very jam-packed. You had Diana and you had Margaret Thatcher and you had the Queen. So it was a lot of big things going on. Whereas I think this, again, like you say, because you're able to hone in on this is really about her, that maybe that's maybe why I like it more, because you do get a sense. So I would say that this is, for me, the best adaptation that we've had of Diana. And I would then say, obviously, that it was followed by The Crown, and then the rest are all just sort of muddled in the background. I don't know, what do you think? Because obviously I know that you sort of have followed, you obviously said that you were alive, and you sort of, I know you watched The Crown and things like that. So for you, what is your thoughts on where this places in the rest of things?
Well, I think it's an important addition to any, if you're a fan and you want to follow anything that has to do with the family, especially this era of their time, it is so important, because there is a lot of talk about what effect they have, you know, especially with recent years with you know, her children and their marriages and all that stuff, you know, like it just shows how relevant it still is. Like, just because she's gone doesn't mean she didn't have an impact.
No.
And I think it's important to look at, because she's not a commoner, right? She was from a house of, right? The house of Spencer is so it's not that she was a lowly peasant person. But it's not the same as actually being in the royal family and showing just how, from her perspective, I don't know if everyone else would agree with that, but from her perspective, just how stifling it was. Like, I like how they used the pearls as like a chain around her neck. Mm-hmm. And how she was constantly fiddling with it, trying to break free. Like, that was very symbolic and very, yeah, this is supposed to be a symbol of wealth and beauty, and look at me and look at what I am. But to her, that's not what it was. You know, it's got that whole gilded cage thing, but in a fresh way. It didn't feel like, oh, here's the gilded cage trope. It's like, no, it felt very different, because it was ugly. It wasn't trying to be pretty.
Not like the heart of the ocean in Titanic.
Yes. Yeah. You know, it was just different.
Yeah.
Oh, you asked about Oscars. I do think costumes should be considered, because a big part of who Diana was to the rest of us was the fact that she was a fashion icon. Maybe that was reluctantly. I don't know if she just naturally fell into that, and she carried it so well. And it's funny how this movie is only over a couple days, but man, she has like 45 costumes in this thing.
Yeah.
And they're all period accurate. They like, as I watched it, I was like, I remember people dressing like this. I you know, like even the fabric choices, I was like, this feels very of that time again, because I was on the planet at the time. Like, oh yeah, I remember this. So as good as the other acting is and the production design, I think Kristen Stewart, hello. But also you got to look at the fashion, because that's just so wrapped up in how we see her identity. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that costumes definitely. I mean, I'd be interested to see if maybe cinematography was one, but maybe not winning, but nominated. I would say. I'm not 100% sure on film, on Best Picture. I don't think it. I loved it, but again, maybe I'm biased. But I don't. I mean, I'll be intrigued to see what the general population of the world think of this film. Obviously, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know what it's like over there, but in the UK, it's only in limited cinemas. Like, it's not everywhere. So It's kind of one of those films that's sort of like art housey, I suppose. So I don't know how well it will do, but I mean, I definitely think 100% that she will and does deserve to be nominated for that role. 100%.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, trying to think if there's anything else that I want to forget. No, any other thoughts you have about the film overall?
No, all I would say is if you are thinking, well, I mean, if you've got this far and we spoil a lot for you, but if you haven't, if you would just enjoy spoiler reviews before going to see a film and you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend going to see it. And I will definitely go and see it again. As I say, I saw it a month ago and I'm so ready to go and see it again because I really enjoyed it. So I think it'll definitely be talked about. I just wonder on what level, if it will. I mean, obviously, because it's about Diana, I think it will have a little bit more longevity because it's a decent, well, I would say a great portrayal, but obviously, it depends. Everyone's different. Because it's a portrayal of Diana, I think it will sort of have a bit more oomph when it comes to the general public, especially. So let's see. But I mean, definitely, it's probably, dare I say, I did say it on Twitter when I watched it. Probably my favorite film of 2021. So not that we've had loads of amazing films in 2021. We've had some decent ones, but
I know people are throwing that phrase around. I'm like, yeah, but is that a high bar to clear?
I know it's not exactly like we had huge blockbusters. Well, we did. I mean, it was either a Marvel film or this. So, I mean, for me, it was definitely this because this just felt a lot more. And the music was really good as well. Like there was a lot of like
Yes.
I wanted to mention that, like sort of the orchestral, like, I can't remember what do you call like all the cellos and stuff? What's in it? Is it
Woodwinds?
Woodwind? Is it no woodwinds?
Strings.
Strings. Sorry, yeah, all the strings. Like they kind of, again, you kind of feel like it makes you feel tense at times, and sort of there is a part when you think she's going to throw herself down some stairs because obviously she did do that in real life, or so is said. I mean, she does say that, but anyway. But yeah, I think that the music again that really helped sort of you feel like it's all very and you got like it gave me Psycho vibes at times. I was sort of like, oh, this is like really intense.
Yeah, this was a movie where the movie just, you feel accosted afterward, like you are uncomfortable. This is not a, like, I need to tell you this, in my screening there was nothing but women in there. There was not a single man. I thoughts, I just want to think about that, but there were people eating popcorn and I did not buy. I'm like, this is not a popcorn. I'm not eating snacks while watching this. I don't think this is a movie where it's like you get all cozy and you have your snacks and be like, oh, I'm going to have a good time. I'm like, no, this is something it's going to make you feel things, and they're not going to feel good. Yeah. The music is a big part of like, wow, I'm really uncomfortable right now. And, obviously that's the point. Because the whole idea, I think, is, yeah, this is what it could have been like to be here. This is a educated guess. Isn't it uncomfortable? No wonder she was so unhappy. So I think it's important to know what you're getting into. It's not like other things. So if you saw Respect back in the summer, this is not like that.
Yeah, no,
this is not like that at all. This is very different. It's very art house, A24 style. Yeah. It's raw. It's relentless. It's really in your face. But if you don't mind going through that to purge yourself, I would say it's actually kind of healthy because it might help you go, oh, wow, either my life is not that bad or I can feel that, but I'm going to come out on top. I'm going to be okay, because just like in the end where she goes, I could be a victim, or I could take my sons and be like, let's get out of here. This place is stifling. So hopefully take the ending message too of you can get out of this. You do have some choices. So I like to think that's what the movie wanted to end with. So take that away as well.
No, I would agree. Definitely go and see it if you can. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I think it's definitely, as you say, it's not one that you go, let's bring all my friends round and watch Spencer tonight, because your friends will be like, what? But it's definitely one to watch. Like I think it kind of, I don't know, maybe it is sort of one to watch alone. Like it kind of feels like that film. Like again, maybe that sort of adds to the, even though I was in a crowded cinema, I felt isolated even though I was around people. And so I think maybe, it's to see it on your own is probably quite I mean, obviously I went to go see it with somebody, and she was asking me questions about the whole thing. She was like, did this happen? I'm like, but you just watch the movie. So but
this is why I prefer to go alone, because people want to talk. I'm like, let's talk after.
Yeah. So, but no, I definitely would recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it. And I think, let's watch this space. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it does over the next few months. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think it has some longevity too, but I do think because it's a different approach, I want to see what everyone's response is to how it's being presented, not necessarily what is being presented. Because the what, I think people are like, oh, sure, movie about Diana, got it. You know, I'm like, no, okay, but it's not what you think. You know, so just brace yourself. So yeah, recommendation from us. Any other thoughts before I sign off?
No, I think that's it. I really enjoyed being able to get my thoughts out on this because I haven't been able to speak to it. So to do it with you is even better.
Into the internet, into the void.
Yes.
Again, I want to thank George for joining me. He's from the Horror Hour. I'll put all the links in the description. Go check out what they're doing over there. They're doing some great stuff. And I'm with the council usually. It's just we're a group and it's hard to schedule things. So it's just nice that all of us have auxiliary channels. So, you know, you should follow everybody that you're like, hey, they sound interesting. You know, go follow them. I'll put all the stuff down there. Check us out. Thank you for following along with us and comment below what you thought of Spencer when you see it. Yeah. Hey, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.